We begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Yud Beis, right at the beginning of the Yamud. The Gemara here is discussing the halachas of Ir Hanidachas. That's a city where the majority of the people are serving Avodah Zarah. Okay, so the Gemara asks, if the people of the city, they convinced themselves, they got themselves involved in Avodah Zarah, not by somebody else that's convincing them. The Mishnah, the Gemara brought the psukim where it simply says that there were others, Yotza, Anoshim, there were others that came and convinced them to serve Avodah Zarah. But what happens if they themselves, the majority, got involved in serving Avodah Zarah? Mahu. What's the halacha? Does the halacha of Ir Hanidachas apply or not? Do I say v'yadichu amar Rachmana? The lashon of the pasuk is that others came and convinced them to serve Avodah Zarah, so it has to be dafka if others are convincing them. But v'loi shehutchu me'aleim, not if they got involved on their own. Or dilma afilu hutchu me'aleim. Or even if they did get involved in their own and serving Avodah Zarah, the halacha of Ir Hanidachas applies. The lashon of the pasuk is just saying the way it commonly happens, but it's not dafka then. Tashamas, the Gemara brings a raya from what it said in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Sidichua nashim v'ktanim. If the ones that convince the people in the city to serve Avodah Zarah are women or little children, then the din of Ir Hanidachas does not apply. But the question is, why not? Amai lehavika hutchu me'aleyen. Even if you say that in the pasuk it says anoshim, and therefore that would exclude women and children, but if you're going to say that the whole thing, that it's others that convince them is lav dafke, so then it's no less than if they are just got involved and convinced themselves to serve Avodah Zarah, that it would apply. So if so, we see from the Mishnah that it has to be dafke, others, and it has to be men, grown men, that convinced to serve Avodah Zarah. Answers the Gemara, no, it's no raya from the Mishnah. Why? Because hanoch basar nafshayu gridi. In this case, if people are getting involved and convincing themselves to serve Avodah Zarah, so they get very drawn after this, because if they convince themselves about this, that means that it's something that they're really involved in. So that's a kind of Avodah Zarah where the Torah says that the din of Ir Hanidachas would apply. Rashi here says the word gridi, even though usually the Gemara uses the term griri, with a reish, with two reishes, which means that you get drawn into something. What Rashi says, you go to say gridi with a dalid, which also means that you get drawn into something. But in a case where people of a city that are convinced to serve Avodah Zarah, that through who? Through women or children, they're following these women and children, it wasn't something that was mamish so serious, because they're not following people that they really trust so much. Little children, there was a foolishness. So it's not the same level of getting involved in Avodah Zarah. That's why that would be an exclusion. Said in the Mishnah, Yudach Ruba, the din of the Ir Hanidachas is when you have the majority of the city that is serving Avodah Zarah. The Gemara, Heichi of Dinan. How exactly do we do this when we have to punish and see that it's the majority of the city? Because if it's an individual, or it's not, if it's the minority, not the majority of the city, then what's the halacha? Each individual gets skila. And then if it's the majority, the whole thing changes. It's only with Sayif, and then the halacha of Ir Hanidachas changes. But the thing is, you need a warning for each individual person of the city that served Avodah Zarah, and each one of them has to be judged separately. So you're judging each one separately. So at that point, though, when you start off, you don't even know that it's a majority yet. So how exactly do you do this? You don't have to give skila right away for any individual that served Avodah Zarah. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda says, Donen. So you judge each individual with the Eidim and the warning that he got, the Chayvshin, and then they put him into prison. If they see that there might be a majority here that served Avodah Zarah, so they have to wait and imprison him. Donen v'Chayvshin. They continue judging the other people in the city and they imprison them until if they come to see if it then turns out to be a majority, then they will be killed like the halacha of Ir Hanidachas. So they have to wait. Amalayule, so all this says to Rav Yehuda on this pshat. How could you say this? Nimtza atama'ana es dinan shalelo. It comes out that you're causing pain for these that have to wait. The halacha by any din, when you give a chiyav misa, you're supposed to give the misa right away. The Gemara actually said earlier in the Masechta that the Bezdin Paskin misa close to the end of the day, and they give the chiyav misa immediately in order not to cause any pain that he should wait. Over here, he's going to have to wait. It could be days or a while until they'll figure out if this is the majority of the city or not. You're not allowed to do this. So Ela Ma'ula, so therefore Ola says, the way it works is Donin, Bezdin Paskins, each individual, and V'Cyclin. If you serve the Avodah Zarah as an individual, he immediately gets Skila. And Donin, V'Cyclin, like this, they continue with all the people in the city and they get Skila. Then when you come to the point where it's a majority, then those that remain from the city, now you see it's a majority, for them you can't give Skila anymore. And for them, they're going to be Chayiv, the Saif and the Halachas of the Irani Dachas will apply to them. Itmer, we learned a similar machlekes. There's actually here also another opinion. How do you go about this? So machlek Rabbi Yechanan and Shlokish discussed this. So Rabbi Yechanan says, like the opinion of Ula, that Donin v'Cyclin. Shlokish Amar, but the Shlokish says what we do is Marbin lehen bati dinim. We bring many bati dinim to judge them all in one day, to be able to see in the very same day what's the story. Is it just individuals that are serving Avodah Zarah? Or is it enough of a majority, many, that it will become an Irani Dachas, so that you should know on that very day itself what to do, if you're giving them skila now, or it's going to be the halacha of Irani Dachas. But is this true? It says regarding Avodah Zarah that that you take out this man or woman and you bring her to the Bezdin, to the city, to judge, to give Chiv Misa. From this you learn out that ish v'isha atamaitzi, if it's one man or woman, then you take her out lisha arecha, to the bezdin of 23 that's in the city. But v'yatamaitzi kol yer kula lisha arecha. If it's a situation of irani dachas, then you don't bring them to be judged by the bezdin of the city. You have to bring them to the bezdin hagadol in Yerushalayim of 71. They're the ones that have to judge them. So how could you say over here that you're going to be marbe the bezdin and you're going to have many batei dinim that are going to judge these people here in the city? They can't judge them, because if they end up being a city of a irani dachas, that judgment is not right. It has to be dafka by the bezdin hagadol. So Ella, the Gemara changes a little bit what Reish Lakish said. What you do is marbelen batei dinim. Like Reish Lakish said, you bring many batei dinim here in the city all on one day to judge them. But this bezdin though is not going to paskin, because if it ends up being irani dachas, you can't have a bezdin of 23. You have to go to the bezdin hagadol. And what you do is ume'ainen b'dineim. They're going to bring all the people of the city as much as possible all in one day to figure out if it's a majority, and they're going to be ma'ayin in their din. But they're not going to yet paskin. If they're going to see that these are all people that serve the Avodah Zarah, and then when it comes to the majority, umaskinan lahu lebezdin hagadol, they're going to bring them then to the bezdin hagadol, v'gamri lahu ledinayu, and then the bezdin hagadol is the one that has to paskin in v'kot lahu, and then they can give them the misa of the irani dachas. Now, if it's done this way, this is not called inay adin, even if this takes a while, because the Bezdin never paskin. You're bringing bati dinim here to be ma'ayin in the din of these people, but Bezdin never paskin and then waited to give a chiyav misa. And then after, so Bezdin sees that it's a majority, then they bring it to the Bezdin hagadol, and the Bezdin hagadol in Yerushalayim, they paskin and then give them the chiyav misa of the Irani dachas.
Both mention chiyav misa.
Both correct.
So either way, you're being ma'akav.
No.
Because both, whether it's Saif or whether it's Kili, you're still going to kill him.
And a chanami. But over here it says ma'ayin b'dinayin. The only ma'ayin in the din, they're not paskin yet. So because they're only ma'ayin in the din, and they didn't paskin yet, the din of inu yadin is only once you paskin. You have to give the misa right away. It said in the Mishnah, what was the v'chulu? What did it say in the Mishnah? So the Mishnah said that there's a distinction between the tzaddikim and the rishayim of the city. Regarding the rishayim, all their possessions, whether they're inside the city or whether they own things outside of the city, has to be brought inside the city and be destroyed in the center and the square of the city. But when it comes to tzaddikim, their belongings, their possessions inside the city have to be burned, but what they own outside of the city does not have to be brought inside. So the Gemara brings a source from the Psukim for this. Sorry, actually, I jumped ahead. That's the next piece of Gemara. This piece of Gemara discusses something else. It discusses people that are traveling. The travelers that are coming through the city. Are they part of the city or not? So the Mishnah said that they are. They could become part of the city. Tanu Rabbanon, son of Brais, we learned about this. Achameres, v'agameles, a donkey rider, a camel rider. Haiveres mimakim lamakim. It's traveling from place to place. And lanu b'toicha, they stayed over in this city. V'hutchu ima, and they became included together with the people of the city that were convinced to serve Avodah Zarah. In the Shtash Sham Lamed Yom, if they stayed there for 30 days, then they become part of the city. So Haim B'Sayif, they will get the same Misaf Sayif from Amayna and Avad, and all their possessions will be destroyed with the city. Pachis mikain, if it's less than 30 days, so then heim beskile u'memainam palat. So then if they did serve avodah zarah, they get the einish like an individual, and their money is not going to be touched. So it's 30 days. That's the amount of time. Freiramini, the Gemara asks a contradiction on this. It says, Kama, this is a Mishnah, or maybe a Braise, it's in Baba Basra, regarding a person that lives in a city. When does he have to participate with paying for the needs of the city? Kama yiyeh be'ir v'yiyeh kanshi yehir. How long should it be in the city that he should be like the people of the city, that he pays for the wall that you have to build, and the different things that you need for the city? So it says, Yud Beis Chaydish. Only if you're there for 12 months, not 30 days. Omarav, sort of answers like Kashia. It's not a contradiction. Ha lemehavi mibnei masa. To be considered to be a person that's from the city, that's 30 days. Ha lemehavi miyasvi masa. Over here, the lashon of the pasuk is yoshvei ha'ir, which means somebody that's dwelling in the city. That's enough to be there for 30 days. It's a different thing. There's the bnei ha'ir. This is my city, and this is being from the inhabitants, or from the ones that dwell in the city. So like Gemara brings a raya for this by a neder. V'hatanya, we see in the Braisa regarding someone that makes a neder, hamudar anam ibnei ya'ir. One that makes a neder, and the language that he used when he made a neder is, I will not have any benefit from the people of this city. Im yesh adam, that is, shenishtash sham yud beis chaydish, whoever lives in this city for 12 months, astal hanis mimenu. That's considered to be bnei ya'ir. This is his city, and you can't have an offer from him. Pachas mikain, if it's less than 12 months, mutal hanis mimenu. You can still have an offer from him. Now, however, if the language of his neder was miyoshvei ya'ir, not someone that this is his city, someone that is living in the city, then I say im nishtah lamed yayim asr lahanis mimenu. If he was there 30 days, he's not allowed to have an offer from him. Pachas mikain, less than 30 days, mutter lahanis mimenu. So we clearly see here there's a difference between bnei ya'ir and yoshvei, someone that's just living in the city, and that's the halacha here regarding the pasuk over here. Also uses the term yoshvei ha'ir. Hachrem, or hachrem, that is hachrem oisav es kol hashabach chulu. Here's the point that I mentioned before, that the Mishnah makes a distinction between the possessions of the Rishayim and the possessions of the Tzaddikim. And the Gemara here is going to bring the Braisa that brings the source for this in the Psukim. Tan Rabbanon, so on the Braisa it says, or the Pasuk it says, that is, Hachre Maisa. You should destroy everything. Then it says, it's Kol HaShabbat. Someone not great. This is part of the Pasuk here, because the Gemara is going to dash on it afterwards. So from Hachrem Oisa, it, what do we learn out? Prat, Lenichse Tzaddikim Shebechutzala. It says Oisa, it's an exclusion. Tzaddikim, their possessions have to be destroyed as well, but not the possessions that are outside of the city. Now then when it says Ve'es Kol HaShabbat, it's coming to add, and everything that's in it, L'Rabbeis Nichse Tzaddikim Shebeseicha. That's saying, but the possessions of Tzaddikim that are inside the city should be destroyed in the city. Then the pasuk says that you have to destroy shalala, all of the spoils of the city. What does it mean when it says shalala? It spoils. V'loi shalal shamayim. Not any spoils that belongs to heaven, as we'll see, if it's kachim or trumeh and meiser and so on. Now, when it said ve'eskol shalala, it doesn't just say shalala, but it says all of its spoils. L'rabbis nichse rishayim. This comes to add that when it comes to the rishayim, those that actually serve the avodah zarah in the city, that even shechutzala, even the things that they own, possessions that they own that are outside the city, have to be gathered and brought inside the city and burnt and destroyed there. Amar Rab Shimon, so Rab Shimon says, why the possessions of the tzaddikim inside of the city should be destroyed? The answer is because who causes these tzaddikim to live in the city and to remain in the city? When they see a city like this of Rishayim that are serving avodah zarah, why didn't they leave? The reason they stayed there is because of Mimainam. It's because of their possessions, their house, and all the possessions that they have there. They didn't want to leave, even though it's a very bad place to live with people that serve avodah zarah. Lefichach, since their money is the cause of this, their money, their possessions in the city will be destroyed as well. Now, Omamar, the Tana said here in the Braisa, Veskol shlola tikbaitz, l'rabbis nichse rishayim shebechutzalaretz. When it says Veskol, it's including by the Rishayim, their possessions outside the city should be brought and destroyed in the city. Amar Rav Chisda, but Rav Chisda adds to this, that's only the assets that these Rishayim own that are close enough to the city that you can bring it on that day to gather and to destroy it in the city. But if they own possessions that are far away, offshore, somewhere far away that is not here, then they don't have to bring it to burn and destroy in the city. Amar Rav Chisda said another halacha about this, Pikdoinis, Shal Anshe Irani Dachas, a Pikode, safe deposits of the people of the Irani Dachas, Mutaren. That's allowed. That does not have to be destroyed with the possessions of the city. Now, what exactly is the pshat in what Rav Chisda is saying? Hey Chidami, what kind of a pekadon is he talking about? Is this a pekadon of people, a possession, an object that belongs to people from another city? Now it's inside the city because they gave it as a pekadon to someone in the city. And on that Rav Chisda said that it's mutter, it doesn't have to be destroyed. Says the Gemara Pshita, that's obvious, the mutarin. Of course it's allowed. Lav shlallahu, it's not the spoils of this city, it belongs to someone else outside of the city. Why would you think that you have to destroy it? So when he said that he's speaking about a pekadon means that it belongs to the people of the city. And ve'isnu be'ira cheres, and it's a pekadon, it belongs to them, but it's a safe deposit that they gave to someone else to keep for them outside the city. And we're talking over here about the pekadon of the Rishayim. But the question is, what's Rav Chisda saying here? If this is a pekadon that they gave to someone else to keep for them outside the city, and it's close enough that they can bring it back inside the city, so then amay mutarin. Why is Rav Chisda now saying that this is allowed? As Rav Chisda himself said, if it's close enough, even outside the city, you have to bring it and destroy it in the city. If the point there is that this is a pekadon that's far away and it cannot be brought into the city, so that point that Rav Chisda already said one time, that when it's far away, it does not have to be destroyed in the city. So the Gemara says, that can't be the pshat. It's not a pekadon that's owned by the people, the Rishayim of the city. The Gemara goes back to the first pshat. It's a pekadon that is owned by people that are not from the Ir Hanidachas, and they gave the people of the Ir Hanidachas to hold this pekadon for them. La'olam, the Ir Cheres, the Mifkedi B'Seicha. So we asked the question, why should you have to destroy this? Why would I think you have to destroy this if it doesn't even belong to the people of the city, of the Ir Hanidachas? And says the Gemara, the case here is kagoin the kabul alei achrayis. When you're holding on to this pekadon and you took responsibility that if it gets lost or destroyed, that you will replace it. Gneve v'aveda, if let's say it's a shem esachar or whatever it is, he's taking responsibility that he's going to replace it. So mal detayme, there would be a svara to say kivin the kabul alei achrayis. When you hold on to something, even though it's not yours, but you have the responsibility to replace it if it gets lost, kididei damya. To some extent, there's a level of ownership that you have on this. And this is actually a halacha that you find b'negeya to chametz. The Gemara in Pesachim says by chametz le'yirah alacha. If you have someone else's object as a pekadon, if you take responsibility over it for geneva v'aveda, or maybe even more of a responsibility, even if an einus happens that you're going to replace it, you have some level of ownership over it. This is what's called, the Gemara there in Pesachim says, davar hagayrim l'mamin k'mamin dami. Even though you don't really own this object itself, but if it gets lost, it's going to be your responsibility to replace it. This will cause you, the fact that you have it is guiding you that you don't have to spend money for this. And therefore you have a certain level of ownership for this. And by chametz, that's sakad halacha, it'll be aser. But over here, though, we're saying that's not the case. Kamash malan, when it says here, the pasuk shlala, it's spoils of the city, it does not include this kind of pekadon that you took responsibility over it. By chametz, it says lo yiroeh lecha. That word lecha, it says that it does include this, but over here shlala doesn't say lecha. It says shlala, it has to be dafka, the spoils of the city itself, and not this kind of pekadon.
Shlala is usually a term used for war. That means when you conquer
a
nation, whatever's left over.
True. But over here, because these people are being all wiped out, so it uses a similar expression. Yeah, similar expression. Rav Chisda said another halacha, behema. If you have the animal of the city, chetzia shal ir hanidachas, it's owned in partnership. Half is owned by people of the city, of the ir hanidachas, v'chetzia shal ir acheres, and half is owned by people from another city. Asura, this animal is going to be asur completely. However, Esau, when it comes to, if you have a doe, you have this doe that's chetzia shal ir hanidachas, chetzia shal ir acheres, half is owned by the people of this city and half is owned by people from another city, muteres. This actually will be allowed. And the Gemara explains what's the reason for this difference. My time, because behema command the loy pligadami. When it comes to an animal, this is like something that you cannot divide. And the reason for this is, what's the halacha of this behema? If it belongs to ir hanidachas, it has to be put to death. It's not, you can't shecht it. Even if you shecht it, Rashi says, it doesn't have a halacha of shchita, you're just putting it to death. And therefore there's no proper shchita here. Now, even though there's somebody else that owns part of this animal, but in order to eat even just a kazayas from this animal, if you want to eat anything of this animal, you have to have shchita. But you can't have a proper shchita because half of it belongs to the ir hanidachas. So therefore it's going to just be killed. If that's the case, you can't shecht any of it, so therefore the entire animal is going to be aser. But when it comes to the Isa, command the pligadamya. The Isa, the dough though, is like it's divided, which means that this dough, you can just divide it. Half is yours and half is the other person's, and he takes his part. That's mutter.
You can sell the animal.
Again?
You can sell the animal and divide the money.
You could what?
Sell the animal.
Sell the animal? No. By the possessions of the Ira Nidachas, you're not allowed to sell. You have to leave it as is and burn it and destroy it. So now, based on this, Rav Chizda asks, behemas Ira Nidachas, when it comes to this behema of the Ira Nidachas, so we just explained that the shchita does not work. When you shecht it, that shchita is not going to be machshiret to eat it, because why? The shchita, according to Rashi's pshat, is not called a shchita. It's called a misa. It's like a nevela. It's like you're killing it. But the question though is, ma'ot b'shchita, maybe this shchita at least should have some effect, which is latara midei nevela, that it would be purified, that it should not be considered a nevela. Usually, when we talk about shchita, what's the point of shchita? In order to be able to eat the meat. But there is actually another point of shchita. There are some cases when you do shchita, and the shchita is not going to be machshira to eat, but the shchita accomplishes something else, that it won't be a nevela, a dead carcass, which causes tumah. For example, if you shecht an animal that's a treifa, or according to some opinions, if a guy does a shchita, the shchita is not going to be machshira to eat, but at least the shechita is going to help that it's not called a dead carcass, it's called an animal that was shechted, and therefore there's no tumah that it causes. So the question is, over here, benegeh to this behemoth by the Ira Nidachas, that you have to kill it, and therefore when you shecht it in order to eat, it's not called a shechita to be able to eat from it. It's like it just was killed. But the Gemara is asking, could it still be considered to be a shechita, at least for this, that it won't be a nevela? And the question is, do I say lefi cherev amrachmana? The Torah says that you have to kill it by a sword, and therefore lo yishna shachata mishchet. Doesn't make a difference if you shechted it. Lo yishna katla miktel. It doesn't make a difference if you actually killed it in any other way. It's considered to be killed by a sword, and it's not a proper shechita for anything, and therefore it'll be like a dead carcass. Or perhaps I could say, kivin de shachta mahanya la shchita. At least for this point, that it takes away the fact that it's an avela. For that, it does help the shchita, even though it does not help to be machshir to eat. So, what's the halacha regarding this? Teiku, this remains a question. There's a big discussion in the Rishonim about the shaila of the Gemara, because according to Rashi's pshat that I'm explaining here in the Gemara, it's not clear why you would think what would be the svar to make a distinction between the 2 points of the shchita. If the shchita is like a misa, it's like killed by the sword, why would there be any reason to make a distinction between the shchita for being machsheret for eating or the shchita for taking it out of a nevela? It's not clear in the Gemara what should be the reason for this distinction. Other Rishonim have different shatim, but this is how Rashi learns the Gemara. Boy, Rav Yosef has a shaila regarding the possessions of the Ira Nidachas. Seir Noshim Tzidkanius. They hear of the women of the city, but the Noshim Tzidkanius of the city that did not serve Avodah Zarah. What's the story with this here? That it has to be destroyed in the city or not? So now Omar Rav says on this shaila, the Rishiyah is aser. You're asking the shaila only about the women, the tzidkanias, so you're implying that if this is the women from the city that did serve Avodah Zarah, so their hair will be aser and has to be burnt. But why is that? The pasuk, when it speaks about burning all the possessions of the city, it says, Tigbats, gather the possessions, v'sarafta, and you burn it in the city. So that's what the pasuk says. And from this you understand, if this is objects that have to just be gathered, and then it's burnt. Yatzazeh, however, the hairs of a woman, you have to cut the hair, and then you gather, and then you could burn. That's not included, because it doesn't say in the pasuk to cut hair. The hair on the body remains on the body. So what's this whole shaila here? So Rav explains, the shaila of Rav Yosef was different. It's talking about a shaitel. It's talking about a wig. And the shaila is as follows. The Gemara explains, Hey Chidami, what's the case with this wig? If this is a wig that was attached to her body, whatever way, it's basically permanently attached to her body. If so, kagufa damya, then it should still be the same like the body itself, similar to what we just said, that the hairs itself, you don't have to cut off from the body. If this is attached to her body, so then it remains on her body, and you don't have to burn it. And Rashi says this is also like clothing. When the clothing that the person is wearing is part of the body itself, and it doesn't have to be removed. Says the Gemara, so the shaila here that Rav Yosef had is, in the case, the tolu besifta, that this is a wig that's hanging on a hook. Do I say, so here the shaila is specifically beneged to this, the wig of the Noshim Tzidkanias. Why? Do I say as follows? Kenichsei tzadikim shebetoicha dami. That this is like any of the possessions of tzaddikim, that, as we said, the possessions of tzaddikim that are inside the city do have to be destroyed in the city. And va'avad has to be destroyed. Or perhaps I say, Kivin the Isle of Venafka Kulavushadami. Even though right now the wig is on a hook, but since whenever she goes in and out, she constantly takes the wig to wear, and so therefore it's not like it's hanging on a hook, it's like she's wearing it as clothing. And if it's like she's wearing it, so therefore by tzaddikim, or in this case by Noshim Tzidkaniyos, what they are wearing as clothing on their body does not have to be destroyed together with the city. Because by tzaddikim and by tzidkaniyos, whatever is not in the city, whatever is outside the city, does not have to be burnt in the city. And the same thing, clothing that they're wearing also does not have to be burnt in the city. That's the shaila. Masha'enkein, if it would be a wig of the noshim that are rishia, is the one that serve Avodah Zarah, over there it doesn't matter. Even if they wear it as clothing, it actually will have to be burnt in the city, because as we said before, by the rishayim, even the possessions that are not inside the city have to be burnt. And therefore, even what they are wearing as clothing also has to be burnt in the city. So therefore, regarding the rishayim, it won't be a shaila. And in Mefarshim it says this whole shaila is dafke beneged to a wig that's hanging on a hook. The Gemara does not bring this shaila regarding bichlal, any clothing a person has that are sitting in the drawer, because clothing that are sitting in a drawer could sit there for a long time. Obviously, that's considered to be possessions in the city. A wig for a woman is something that she keeps on putting on, even if it's now on the hook. It could be considered to be like a garment that she's wearing, even though it's on the hook, because she keeps on putting it on. Okay, so Teiku, this remains unresolved. There's Kol Shalala, going back to the Mishnah, it said that you have to gather all of the spoils, tikbites, al toich rechayva, into the city. And the Mishnah said that if there is no city, so then you have to, if there is no square, that is, it has to be brought into the center of the city, into a square. And if there is no square, so then you have to make a square for it. So the Gemara here brings the machlokes, Tana Rabbanan, we learned in Abraisa, ein lo rechayv. If it doesn't have that city, or that street, that square, then ein anas asir anidachas. Then it cannot be turned into an ir anidachas. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, Ein lo rechayv. If it presently does not have that square, Eisen lo rechayv. So you make that square where you're going to burn it. What's the basis of their argument? Mar Savar. One opinion here is that rechayva, when it says in the pasuk that you have to gather it into the square of the city, make karamash. It's mashma that you're gathering it into the square that's already there from before. But Umar Sava, Rabbi Kiva says, Rechayva the hashtanami mashma. When it says Rechayva, it means even that square that you can make now in order for it to be an irani dachas. The next part of the Mishnah, it says, Va'agdeishais shaba yipaduchulo. When it comes to hektish of the city, so that will not be burned together with all the possessions of the city. It has to be redeemed. Tana Rabbanon, and a price we learned about this. Hayuba kachim. If there's kachim in the city. So if this is kachim mizbeach, if these are animals that are dedicated to be brought as a carbon on the mizbeach, so for them, you can't redeem them. What's done is yamusu, has to be left to die. Meaning, how is this done? You put it into a small room, you give it to eat in a way that it dies. Kache bedekabayis, if this is kachim that's not for a carbon, but it's kachim that's dedicated for the funds of the Beis HaMikdash to be used for the needs of the Beis HaMikdash, that yipadu, that will be redeemed. It will not be burnt with the city, it'll be redeemed. Utrumis, the trumis of the city that the kohen has, Yerakvu, has to be left to rat, and Ma'aseh Sheni, Kisvei HaKodesh, the Ma'aseh Sheni that has to be brought and eaten in Yerushalayim, also has a certain level of Kedusha, and Kisvei HaKodesh, anything that has a Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzahs, and so on, Yigonza, that has to be hidden and put away and not destroyed in the city. Rab Shimon says, when it says in the pasuk Behem Ta, what is best? So before, the Gemara brought that the reason why we don't include the kachim is because it says shlala and not shlal shamayim. But here the Gemara says, Rab Shimon adds, when it says in the pasuk that you have to burn behem ta, that means v'loi behem is b'choir or meiser. That excludes also a b'choir and a meiser that's brought as a carbon, that does not have to be burnt in the city as well. Okay, now the Gemara is going to explain the machlokes over here, why the Tanakama would disagree with this. And then he says, shlala, when it says shlala, prat lekesef hektish, the kesef meiser, the money of hektish and the money of meiser. Okay, the Gemara will explain all this. Okay, so the Gemara starts with the first thing it says in the Braise regarding a carbon. That a carbon is not burnt in the city, but instead what's done with it? It's left to die in a room, but not burnt together with the city. So now Amamar, kachim is beich yamusu, it's left to die. But the question is, Vamai, why is it left to die? Vamai yamusa that is. Yiru achi yistavu. Instead, what should be done is, why should the hektish lose out from this? It's not going to be burnt with the city. Okay, so but what should be done though is, let it be left to graze, achi yistavu, until it gets a mum, and then v'yamachru, and then you can sell it, and v'yiplu the mail in a dava, and then the money could be used as an adava to bring as a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so Rashi over here explains that the carbon itself obviously cannot be brought. It cannot be burnt in the city, but it's understood that the carbon itself, the animal itself, cannot be brought as a carbon. Why? Because it's a zevach that belongs to a rasha, and that's a teyeva. It cannot be brought as a carbon. But the Gemara is asking, but fine, the behemoth itself cannot be brought as a carbon, but it doesn't have to be left to die. You could allow it to get a mum. And once the halacha by a carbon from Mizbeach is, when it has a mum, you're allowed to redeem it. And then the money should be used to buy and to bring a carbon adova. So the Gemara brings two pshat on why this can't be done. Rabbi Yechanan says the reason is because it says in the pasuk Zevach Rishayim Toyeva. A carbon that comes from a rasha is abominable. Now, when it says this Toyeva, according to Rabbi Yechanan's opinion, Toyeva means not only regarding the actual animal itself, even if it'll be redeemed, and then the money that you got for this animal is also called a teyeva, and therefore it cannot be brought as a carbon. Reish Lakish says, Mamim Bailimhu. Reish Lakish says that what we're talking about over here is something else. We're talking about a carbon that still has a level of ownership by the owner of this carbon. And what case is that? Usually a carbon, once you dedicate it as a carbon, it's not yours. It belongs to Hektish. What are we talking about? The Kachim Shechayiv Bachri Yusan. This is Kachim that a person dedicates and he takes responsibility to replace it if it gets lost. So for example, when a person dedicates a carbon, he says Harei Alai. It's a net that he takes responsibility if he gets lost. And what's the halach in such a case? Rab Shimoni, this follows Rab Shimon's opinion. The Amar Rab Shimon says, Mamain Bailimhu. If it's your responsibility to replace it, it's considered to be your mammon regarding certain halachas, and therefore here as well, it's considered to be yours. And since it's considered to be yours, you cannot use this. It's still mammon bailim, and therefore therefore the money of this is going to be asar, because it's still the money of the people of the city, of the Irani Dachas, and therefore this money cannot be used to be brought for a carbon. But on the other hand, though, even though it's mom and bailim, but it still was dedicated for a carbon already. It's still kachim, so you can't burn it together with everything else in the city. It's not kovid shamayim to burn this together with the rest of the city. But here, this opinion of Reb Shimon is similar to what we had in Amar Aleph regarding something that you have achrayis over it. You don't really own it anymore because you dedicated it to hektish, but you took achrayis over it. If it gets lost, that achrayis gives you a level of ownership of it. And therefore, this is something that cannot be then redeemed and be brought as a carbon. But the Gemara asks, how could you say that this is Rab Shimon's opinion? The Sefer Rab Shimon, the Sefer of this Braisa. It continues the Braisa, Rab Shimon argues. So the Sefer is Rab Shimon. It's a Reisha Lav Rab Shimon. That means that the Reisha of this Braisa is not Rab Shimon. So Ella, the Gemara says, according to Reish Lakish, that there's another opinion, a little bit of a different shot. Ella, what we're talking about over here is, it is a carbon that there's an ownership. The owner that dedicated to this carbon still has an ownership over it. Why? Because it's Bekotchim Kalim. We're talking specifically about Kotchim Kalim. As we know, regarding Kotchim, there are two categories. Kotchim could only be eaten in Dazara and so on. And then Kotchim Kalim, that could be eaten in Yerushalayim as a different halacha. And Kotchim Kalim, Va'alibe, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. The Omar, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Kotchim Kalim, Mamen Bailim. Kotchim Kalim, the owner still has an ownership on this, and therefore, since it's his money, therefore it's going to be Asr Bahana, even the money of this, there's no option of redeeming it when it gets a mum. But on the other hand, though, it can't be burnt. It's not covered to have it be burnt together with all the possessions of the city, and that's why the Braisa says that it should be left to die. So this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. So we're specifically talking about Kotchim Kalim. So the Gemara asks on this pshat, well, according to this, Kotchim. If it was Kotchim, then it's completely hektish. So what would be a halach in such a case? Yipadu. There should be an option to redeem this, because over here it doesn't belong to the owner. It doesn't have the Isra of Irani Dachas. It's Kotchim. It belongs to Hektish. So if so, you should wait until it gets a moment. You can redeem it. So if so, the question is, the Tani Sefer. What is the next case the Braisa says? Kachim bed the kabayis, if this is not a carbon at all, if it's kachim that's dedicated for the needs of the Beis Hamikdash, so then you padu, that could be redeemed. Why is it going to such a far case? Lifleik velistni bidida. It can make a distinction even regarding a carbon itself. And it could say, only kachim kalim, since we're following Rabbi Yisrael Lili's opinion that you have ownership over it, over there you can't redeem it. Kachim, since it belongs completely to Hekdesh, you can wait until it gets a moment, you could redeem it. Why doesn't it make this distinction? Answers the Gemara, the reason it doesn't say this is because this won't always be true. Kivin the Ike Chatos, there is a case of a carbon Chatos. Right, when it comes to kachim, there's different kinds of kachim. One of them is a chatos, shemesu ba'alel. The halacha by a chatos, that the owner dies, the lemisa azla. That has to be left to die. This is actually a halacha l'moishim misinai, that by a carbon chatos, if the owner is not here anymore, that carbon cannot be redeemed even with a mum. It has to be left in a room to die. So therefore, it can't make this distinction and say that by kachim you could redeem. Because even if it's going to be true in most cases, but not by a carbon chatos. Therefore, it didn't make that distinction regarding the carbon chatos. Says the Gemara, we have here the two opinions. How to explain this braise regarding the kachim mizbeach, why you can't redeem it. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yechon Eliyamek Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yechon did not say like Reish Lakish's opinion because he says, D'chsiv, Zevach Rishayim Toyeva. He brought the pasuk, there's no option to redeem. It says, Zevach Rishayim Toyeva. That means the carbon itself and the money that you would get for redeeming it is also all abominable. So there's no option to do this. Ela Reish Lakish, my time Eliyamek Rabbi Yechonin. Why doesn't Reish Lakish say simply like Rabbi Yechonin said? Why is he saying the pshat that it's only Rabbi Yisrael Glili? And says the Gemara, Malach, because Reish Lakish disagrees with this. He says, Ki Amidina Zevach Rishayim Tayeva. This pasuk that Rabbi Yechonin says that this carbon is a Tayeva. Hanemili Heichad Isnu Beinayu. That's only this carbon itself that is from the Irani Dachas. That's a Tayeva. Aval hacha kivin de ishtani. But over here, what was our question? Our question is wait until it gets a mum. And once it gets a mum, it changes. And now you can redeem it. And now you have only money. Ishtani. Then it's not anymore a teyeva. It's not that carbon itself that comes from the Rishayim of the city. And therefore, Reish Lakish says in that case, it would be possible to redeem it. And therefore, he had to explain that this braisa that is follows Rabbi Yisrael Glili's opinion. Okay, now it goes on to Rab Shimon said here. Rab Shimon says that when it says in the pasuk behem tacha, or really it's behem ta, when it says behem ta, the animals of the city, that's excluding v'loi behemes b'choyer u'maiser. That the behema of b'choyer and maiser, the firstborn or the maiser behema, is not included in what has to be burnt in the city. So the Gemara b'mayaskina, what are we talking about? Ileime b'tmimin. If we're talking about a regular b'choyer and a maiser, which is still a tam that's supposed to be brought as a carbon, so then why is Reb Shimon saying that we exclude this from the word behemta? We already had the pasuk that said shlala, and it excludes shlal shamayim. Shlala means only its spoils, which excludes shlal shamayim, that if it belongs to heaven, which is a carbon, and that can't be burnt. And even the Tanakama should agree to this. What's the halacha with the b'choyer and maiser? The halacha by b'choyer and maiser is as long as it doesn't have a mum, it has to be brought as a carbon. The moment it gets a mum, then you can shecht it and eat it for yourself. The owner can eat it. It doesn't have to be brought as a carbon at all. When it has a mum, you can't work with it and do with it whatever you want. You have to eat it, but it does not have to be brought as a carbon at all. So if it's a carbon, if it's a tam and it's brought as a carbon, so then that's shlal shamayim. It says the Gemara, Elo bebali mumin. Sorry, this is part of the question. Sorry, Elo bebali mumin. So you're going to say that it has a mum. If so, shlolaninu. So then that's part of the spoils of the city, as I just explained. Once it has a mum, the owner can eat it for himself. So that's his. So if so, it has to be burnt together with the city, all the possessions of the city. So the Gemara says, Omer Avine, the pshat here is la'olam bebali mumin. It is speaking about the b'choyer and the ma'isa once it has a mum. But still, it cannot be burnt together with the rest of the things of the city because something, if you own an animal and it can be eaten just as being your animal, then it has to be burnt with everything in the city. Yatsu Elo, but here, according to Rab Shimon, you have an additional exclusion from the word behemta that comes to say she'ein nechal b'toiras behemtacha. Even though now when it has a mum you can eat it, but it's not exactly like just a regular behemoth that you own. Elo b'toiras b'choyer or meiser. It's eaten like b'choyer or meiser. Once it has a mum, this is a b'choyer and meiser that you are allowed to eat. but it still has a name of B'chayr and Meiser. As I mentioned, you have to eat it. You can't just use it to plow in the field for you, to work with it. You have to go ahead and shecht it and eat it. It still has a name of B'chayr and Meiser on it, and therefore Rab Shimon excludes this from this word behemta when it has a mum. But the Tanakama though disagrees with this. The Tanakama says once it has a mum, so then it's yours. You can eat it for yourself, and it's going to be part of the shlal of the city, and you have to burn it together with everything else in the city. According to the Gersa we have here in the Gemara, it's Maisav, the shlal shamayim ninu. According to Rab Shimon, even once it has a mum, it's considered to be shlal shamayim. Others take this out because it's not really the drash here from the word behemto, not from the word shlala, which the drash is shlal shamayim. Okay, so this is Ravina's pshat and this machlokes. So again, the point there is, according to Ravina, the argument of the Tanakama and Rab Shimon is regarding the B'chayr and the Meiser once it has a mum. At that point, is it considered to be part of the behemoth of the city that has to be burnt, or no? Because it has the name of B'chayr and Meiser on it, and you have to eat it. It's not like a regular animal that you can do whatever you want with it. Therefore, it's not burnt together with the city. Says the Gemara, O pliege the Shmuel. This pshat of Ravina argues with Shmuel's pshat in this machlokes. Why? Because the Amar Shmuel said on this machlokes of Rab Shimon and the Tanakama that hakoil korev v'hakoil nifta, everything that is brought as a carbon and everything that is redeemed. Now that's what he said. Now what does this statement mean? My karma. What did he mean to say? Hachi karma. This is what Shmuel is saying. That here, the pshat the Gemara is going to explain here is that according to Shmuel, the machlokes of the Tanakama and Rab Shimon regarding the B'chayr and the Meiser is actually when the B'chayr and the Meiser is still a tam, and it could be brought as a carbon. And there's still a machlokes about this, whether it has to be burnt or not. And hachi kama, this is what we're saying over here. That kol shekorav keshehu tam, that if this is a carbon, that if it's a tam, it can be brought as a carbon. And v'nifte keshehu balmum, and even when it gets a balmum, it's still going to be kachim. And in order for you to be able to use it, you're going to have to redeem it. So then I say mishlala imut. That pasuk that we brought before, that it says shlala, which excludes shlal shamayim, will exclude such a kind of carbon because this is a full carbon of kachim. V'haraya, even after it gets a mum, it remains kachim, and you have to redeem it. That's what's excluded according to the Tanakama. But v'chol shekarev kishehu tam, but ve'einin nifte kishehu balmum. However, when you come to the B'chayr and the Meiser, true, when it's a tam, it has to be brought as a carbon. But when it's with a mum, over here, you can eat it for yourself. It does not have a din of a carbon anymore, and you don't even have to redeem it anymore. Kagayin B'chayr Meiser, like B'chayr Meiser. Mibehemta nafka. That's not included in the drasha of shlala to exclude shlal shamayim. For that, you're going to have a separate drasha, and this the Tanakama disagrees with. Rab Shimon holds you learn out from behemta to say that this also does not get burned together with everything in the city. So according to Shmuel, the point here is that the machlokes of the Tanakama and Rab Shimon is not regarding a b'chayr and the ma'isa once it had a mum. That was Ravina's pshat. Shmuel's pshat is the b'chayr and the ma'isa, even when it's still a tam. So according to the Tanakama, because b'chayr and ma'isa is a kind of carbon, that the moment it gets a mum, it's not a carbon anymore, it's not called shlal shamayim. Mashenkin, according to Rab Shimon, true, it's not shlal shamayim like the other karbonis, but nevertheless, he learns out from behemta that as long as it's still a tam, that you don't burn it together with everything else in the city. So that's the pshat and machlokes of Tanakam and Rab Shimon according to Shmuel. Okay, so Rashi over here says that this is following over here. We had before Rabbi Yisrael Glili said that kachim kalim is mom and bailim. So according to this pshat, he argues on this that the Tanakama holds that kachim kalim is Rav Shimon argues on this point that the Tanakama says that kachim kalim is mom and bailim. Okay, Rashi explains the scene. Okay, let's go weiter over here. Sagt the Gemara trumais yerakfu. That the trumis over here have to rat. So what's the pshat? This Amar Rav Chizda says leishanu, that it says that the trumas have to be left to rat. When is this? Elo trume biyad Yisrael. This is the truma that the Yisrael still has in his possession. He separated the truma, but he didn't give it to the Kayan yet. So this truma that the Yisrael has in his possession is not going to be burnt together with the rest of the city. And the reason is because since it's already dedicated as truma, so therefore this doesn't belong to this Yisrael of the city. He's the Rosh Yisrael of Avodah Zarah. It doesn't belong to him. Who does it belong to, this truma? This could belong to a tzaddik. And if it belongs to a tzaddik, a kohen, a tzaddik that is not even from the city, you can give it to a kohen that's outside of the city. So therefore, it's not burned together with everything inside the city. Aval trume biyad kohen. If this is a truma that's in the hands of the kohen, and this is a kohen over here in the city, who, since this is his money, tisaref. So that is burnt together with all the possessions of the city. Rav Yosef asks on this pshat, Ma'aser Sheni. In the Brayso it says, in the Mishnah it said, Ma'aser Sheni as well, the Kisvei HaKodesh, Yigonzu, that it's not burnt together with the city, it has to be hidden. So if Ma'aser Sheni biyad Yisrael, Ma'aser Sheni that a Yid has in his possession, Ketruma biyad Kayin. It's like the Truma in the hands of the Kayin, meaning that the Kayin owns it, the Yisrael owns it. Dami, it's the same thing. The Katani, and what does it say? Yigonzu, that you have to hide it. It's not burnt together with the city. Meaning, from here you see that even if it is owned by a kohen that's in the city, but if it's owned by the kohen, it had the Truma has kedusha, the Ma'aser Sheni has kedusha, the Kisvei HaKodesh have kedusha, and therefore it can't be burnt together with the things of the city. So how could Rav Chisda say that if it's owned by the kohen of the city, then it's burnt together with everything in the city? So Ella Yitme, if he said what he said, Achi Yitme. This is what Rav Chisda said. Rav Chisda, Lo Yishanu Ella Trume B'yad Kayin. The Trume that a Kayin already got from the Yisrael, he has it in his possession, even though he owns it, it's his. But nevertheless, it cannot be burned together with the city, since it's Trume, so we're not going to be mezalzel in this Trume to burn it together with everything else in the city. Avol Trume B'yad Yisrael, if this is Trume that the Yisrael separated and it's still in his possession, so this, you don't even have to leave it to rot. To nasan l'kayin should be racheres. So that doesn't have to be burnt, and it doesn't have to be left to rot either. You just give it to a kayin that's in a different city, outside the city, because you didn't give it yet. So give it to another kayin that's outside the city. Okay, we'll stop over here.